My name is Cora Sterling, and for most of my life, I believed that love was a verb, an act of giving, of mending, of holding things together when they threatened to fall apart. I grew up in the small, sleepy town of Maple Creek, a place stitched together with good intentions and frayed seams, where everyone knew your family's history better than you did. I was the family's success story, the one who had left for the glistening coastal city of Silverport, where I'd built a life as a landscape architect, shaping unruly earth into places of peace and beauty. My company, Terra Firma Landscapes, was my heart-made manifest, a testament to the belief that with care and structure, anything could flourish. I thought I had built my life on solid ground. I was wrong. The foundation was sand, and the tide was about to come in. The truth arrived not with a crash, but with the quiet hum of my laptop on a Tuesday morning. It was a week before my 30th birthday, and the dawn light was filtering through my apartment window, casting long, soft shadows across the floor. I loved these quiet moments before the city woke up, a cup of jasmine tea warming my hands, the scent of salt and eucalyptus drifting in from the balcony. It was my ritual, a moment of peace before the demands of the day began. As part of this routine, I logged into my online banking portal to move some funds into my investment account. That's when I saw it. The number in my primary savings account, the one I'd been carefully nurturing for a down payment on a small cottage by the sea, wasn't just smaller. It was gutted. A balance that should have been comfortably over $50,000 now read $9,314.81. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. A cold dread, slick and heavy, slid down my spine. I clicked through the transaction history, my heart hammering against my ribs. There it was, a single, colossal wire transfer from 5 days prior. Minus $42,500. Sent to my father's account. No note, no explanation. Just a digital void where my future had been. My first thought was fraud, a sophisticated hack. It had to be. My family, for all their complexities, wouldn't. They couldn't. The trust one had in them was a load-bearing wall in the architecture of my life. To even consider that they had done this felt like a betrayal of myself. I called my father, Robert, my hands trembling so badly I had to dial twice. The phone rang, and on the third ring, he picked up, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. Cora, sweetheart. To what do I owe the pleasure on this fine morning? I could hear the television murmuring in the background, a game show host's manufactured enthusiasm. Dad, I started, my voice thin, reedy. Something's happened. Something is wrong with my savings account. A very large amount of money is gone. The line went quiet. The game show noise seemed to fade. In that silence, I heard another voice, faint but unmistakable, my mother, Eleanor. Robert, just tell her. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a hack. Robert cleared his throat, his cheerful facade crumbling into something defensive, almost irritated. Now, Cora, don't get dramatic. It's not gone. We had to use it. It was an emergency. I sank onto my sofa, the beautiful morning light feeling suddenly harsh and interrogating. Use it? Dad, that was $42,000. What kind of emergency? I tried to keep my voice steady, but a tremor of disbelief ran through it. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you ask? He scoffed, a sound I knew well. It was the sound of dismissal, the sound he made when he felt his authority was being questioned. Ask? Cora, we're your family. Your mother needed a procedure, her veins. You know how she suffers. And Nathan's vintage Mustang, the one he's been restoring, the engine block cracked. A catastrophe. And the roof on the house has been leaking for months. We were behind. He listed their problems as if they were self-evident justifications, a series of unfortunate events that naturally led to my bank account. Then my mother's voice came onto the line, no longer faint. It was smooth and coated in a familiar, saccharine layer of martyrdom. Darling, what were you going to do with it right this second, anyway? Buy yourself a fancy birthday present? A trip somewhere? We had real problems here. Grown-up problems. We assumed you'd understand. The casual cruelty of it stole the air from my lungs. My birthday, I whispered, the words getting lost in the hollow space that had opened up inside me. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken it in the quiet days leading up to my 30th birthday and hadn't even thought to mention it. They were going to let me celebrate, blissfully unaware that they had plundered the very future I was celebrating. The silence that followed their explanation was the most profound sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a pillar cracking, of a foundation giving way. It was the sound of a lifetime of illusions shattering into dust. I had always been the dependable one, the fixer, the one who made things right. I'd thought it was an act of love. In that moment, I realized they saw it as an obligation. My success wasn't mine. It was a communal resource they felt entitled to tap at will. I see, I said, my voice eerily calm. The storm of emotion inside me, the grief, the rage, the profound sorrow, had coalesced into a single, hard point of clarity. Then I have to go. Please don't call me again. Cora, don't be like that, my father started, his tone shifting to anger. We're your family, my mother cried, her voice cracking with practiced despair. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply pressed the red icon on my screen and ended the call. The silence that filled my sunlit apartment was absolute. For a long time, I just sat there, tracing the patterns on my handmade ceramic mug. The tea had gone cold. They thought that because I was the responsible one, they had lifetime access to my well-being, to the fruits of my labor, to my very soul. They mistook my generosity for a permanent, open line of credit. But that morning, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, I stopped being the garden they could raid at will. I became the stone wall. I didn't storm. I didn't rage. I moved with a quiet, deliberate precision that felt foreign and yet utterly necessary. My pain became a checklist. I opened my laptop again, my fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. First, the house in Maple Creek. The charming but decaying bungalow on Willow Creek Lane. The mortgage was in my name. My mother's credit had been too poor to secure the loan years ago, so I had stepped in, a gesture of love and security for my parents. I found the online portal for the mortgage company. With a few clicks, I canceled the automatic payments. Then, I called their customer service line. I explained, in a calm and even voice, that I was the sole name on the mortgage but no longer resided at the property and would no longer be making payments. The agent, a woman named Brenda, was sympathetic. She informed me that the account would go into default and proceedings would begin. I thanked her and hung up. Next, Nathan's car. The vintage Mustang wasn't just a hobby, it was a money pit I'd been subsidizing for years. The loan for its initial purchase and for the endless stream of parts was from a credit union account I had co-signed for him. I had been making the monthly payments as a gift. I logged into that account and stopped the autopay. Then I called the credit union. I explained that I was revoking my co-signer status due to financial duress and unauthorized use of my funds by another family member. The bank, hearing the words unauthorized usage in relation to the $42,500, was suddenly very interested. They told me they would be in touch with Nathan about his loan being immediately due, and if not, they would begin the repossession process. Then came the smaller, insidious roots that had woven themselves into the soil of my finances. The family phone plan, a sprawling account with 4 lines, all billed to me. Cancelled. The premium streaming subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, that I paid for so they could have their evening entertainment. Cancelled. The Amazon Prime account that shipped a steady stream of their whims and wants to their doorstep on my dime. Cancelled. Even the utilities for the house, which I'd put in my name to help them get a lower deposit. I called each company and had my name removed, effective immediately. Each click was a snip of a wire, a severance of a tie. It wasn't an act of vengeance. It was an act of survival. I was a landscape architect, and I knew that sometimes, to save a dying plant, you had to perform a drastic, painful pruning. You had to cut away the diseased limbs so the core could have a chance to heal and grow again. I was pruning my life. And as I did, I felt not triumph, but a deep, aching grief for the garden I had so lovingly tended, only to discover it was full of rot. By noon, my phone began to light up like a wildfire. The first call was from Nathan. I let it go to voicemail. The message was frantic. Cora? What the hell is going on? The credit union just called me. They said the loan is due in full or they're taking the Mustang. Did you do this? Call me back. This is my car. Then came a text from my mother. Cora, the bank just sent a notification about the mortgage. It says it's in default. This has to be a mistake. Please fix it. You know I can't handle the stress. An hour later, a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. It was a woman from the gas company, informing me that service to 12 Willow Creek Lane would be disconnected if the account holder, Eleanor Sterling, couldn't provide a new deposit and payment. I told her I was no longer associated with that address. The messages grew angrier, more confused, and then, predictably, they turned sweet. A voicemail from my father. Cora, honey, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Let's just talk this through. We're family. Family helps each other. Just call us. We're worried about you. Family. The word, once a source of warmth, now felt like a weapon they used to justify their theft. They only ever invoked it when they needed something, when the lights they took for granted began to flicker. I didn't respond to any of it. I was busy. I was on the phone with my bank, formally disputing the $42,500 wire transfer as unauthorized. I was changing every password to every account I owned. I was freezing my credit. I was building a fortress, brick by painful brick, around the life I had left. It wasn't the money that had broken me. I could earn more money. It was the ease with which they had done it. The complete absence of guilt. The casual assumption that what was mine was theirs. They had taught me what love and family were supposed to look like, a tapestry of support, trust, and mutual respect. Then they had taken that beautiful image, forged my name on it, and sold it to pay for their own comforts. I scrolled through my old text messages, a digital archaeologist digging through the ruins of my own naivety. Last Christmas, a picture of the three of them by the tree I'd paid for, with gifts I'd bought. Dad, so proud of our girl. You're our shining star. Mom, we love you more than words can say. Cora, you are our greatest blessing. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed all day began to well in my eyes. I used to read those words and feel a warmth spread through my chest. Now, they just felt hollow, transactional. If I was their blessing, why did they treat me like an ATM with a pulse? That evening, I turned my phone off for the first time in years. The silence was deafening at first, then slowly it began to feel like a sanctuary. I sat on my balcony, watching the lights of Silverport glitter to life across the water. For the first time, I wasn't the fixer, the guarantor, the emergency contact. I was just Cora. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like enough. The following Friday, they appeared. I was sketching a design for a public park, a sprawling project with winding paths and a central fountain, when the intercom buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cora? It's us. Open the door. My father's voice, tight and strained, crackled through the speaker. My heart leaped into my throat. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. There they were on the pristine, slate-tiled landing of my building. Robert, his face flushed with a blotchy, red anger, pacing back and forth. Eleanor was leaning against the wall, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her expression a perfect portrait of wounded fragility. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just watched them. The buzzer sounded again, longer this time, more insistent. Cora, this is ridiculous. We drove all the way out here. Let us in. Robert's voice was louder now, echoing in the quiet hallway. My mother began to speak, her voice trembling artfully. Darling, please. We're your parents. We just want to talk. Your brother is devastated. The house. Cora, how could you do this to us? How could I do this? The question was so absurd, so perfectly inverted from reality, that a strange, cold calm settled over me. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to demand I undo the consequences of their actions. They were here to put me back in my box. I stood there, my back pressed against the cool wood of the door, and listened as they pounded, pleaded, and eventually threatened. You're ruining this family, Cora. After everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me. They had given me a childhood where I learned to be an adult by the age of 10. They had taught me that love was conditional, that my worth was measured by my utility. They had raised me to be their safety net, and now they were furious that the net had been pulled away, leaving them to face the ground. I retreated from the door and sat on my couch, pulling a soft cashmere throw over my legs. I sipped my water and waited. After 10 minutes of a one-sided siege, the pounding stopped. I heard them muttering, my father's voice a low growl of fury, my mother's a series of theatrical sobs. Then, the sound of the elevator doors dinging open and closed. They were gone. The moment the silence returned, I opened my laptop. I had been in contact with a lawyer that week, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Caldwell. I typed out a short, simple email. Please proceed with the full financial disassociation. Revoke all powers of attorney. Dissolve all remaining ties. That evening, I saw my mother's Facebook post. It was shared by my cousin, Brenda, with a single, sad face emoji. Eleanor had posted a stock photo of a shattered heart with a cryptic caption, "Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the ones you nurtured and loved the most. Pray for families who are torn apart by selfishness." The comments flooded in from her friends in Maple Creek, a chorus of digital sympathy for a story they only knew one side of. You raised her too well, Eleanor. She got a big head. Kids today are so ungrateful. They forget where they came from. She owes you everything. Disgraceful. Ungrateful. Entitled. I had given them my time, my energy, my peace of mind, and a significant portion of my income for over a decade. I had done it not out of duty, but out of a deep, abiding love I thought was reciprocated. They hadn't just used me. They had weaponized that love against me. The last thing I did that night was call my cell phone provider and change my number. I left one final voicemail on my old line, a message for no one and everyone, a final planting of a boundary stone. You chose your comfort over my trust. You broke something I spent a lifetime building. You can have the pieces, but you can't have me. Then I blocked their numbers from my new phone. I blocked Brenda. I blocked every flying monkey and Maple Creek gossip I could think of. There were no fireworks, no satisfying final confrontation. Just the profound, healing quiet of a door clicking shut. The silence was no longer a weapon they wielded against me. It was finally, mercifully mine. The first few weeks of that silence were a strange mix of liberation and phantom pain. I'd find myself reaching for my phone to share a piece of good news, a new client, a breakthrough in a design, only to remember there was no one on the other end of the line who I used to call. The habit of being their daughter, their anchor, was deeply ingrained. It was like a limb that had been amputated. I could still feel it tingling. A text broke through my self-imposed quarantine. It was from my other cousin, Julia, the quiet one, the one who had always seen me rather than what I could do for people. Hey, Brenda told me what's happening. Just wanted to say I'm thinking of you. Are you okay? It was the first question anyone had asked that wasn't a demand or an accusation. I stared at the words, feeling a wave of emotion so strong it made my throat ache. I'm not sure, I typed back honestly. But I think I will be. Okay, she replied. My door is always open. No questions asked. That small gesture of unconditional support was a balm on a raw wound. It reminded me that family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes, it was about who showed up for you when the storm hit. A week later, I had my first session with a therapist. Dr. Lena Reyes was a woman with kind eyes and a directness that I appreciated. She sat across from me in her serene, light-filled office overlooking the bay. "Tell me about your family, Cora," she began. I told her everything. The money, the entitlement, the years of quiet sacrifices. I told her about the missed birthdays, the loans that were never repaid, the constant undercurrent of crisis that I was always expected to manage. "When did you first feel responsible for your parents' happiness?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. The memory surfaced with a startling, painful clarity. "I was 12, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My mother was crying at the kitchen table because the power was going to be shut off. She was so distraught. My father was out looking for work, which usually meant he was at the local bar. I felt this crushing weight. So I took the money I had saved from my paper route. It was about $60, a fortune to me, and I put it in an envelope and slipped it into her purse. The next day, the lights were still on. She never mentioned the money, but she hugged me and said I was her little angel." Dr. Reyes nodded slowly. "So, you learned at a very young age that your role was to fix their problems, to soothe their distress, often at your own expense." "I thought it was love," I confessed, shame washing over me. "I thought that's what a good daughter did." "A good daughter," she said gently, "is not required to be a parent to her own parents. What you've been doing, Cora, is not just cutting financial ties. You are resigning from a job you were never meant to have. It's a painful retirement, but a necessary one." Her words resonated deep within me. I wasn't a selfish daughter. I was a child who had been parentified, and I was finally, at 30, allowing myself to grow up and leave the nest they had built around me like a cage. The guilt was still there, a persistent ghost in the halls of my mind, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of something else, clarity. I felt seen. The true test of that clarity came on a gray, drizzly Sunday a month later. I was curled on my couch, lost in a book, a lit candle casting a warm glow around the room. It was the kind of peaceful afternoon I had once only dreamed of. My new phone, which I kept on silent most of the time, lit up with an email notification. The address was a burner, a random string of letters and numbers, but the subject line made my stomach clench. Urgent. Your father. It was from my mother. My finger hovered over the delete button, my mind screaming at me not to open it. But the primal pull of fear was too strong. I clicked. The email was short, riddled with typos, and steeped in panic. "Cora, you have to call me. Your dad fell off a ladder cleaning the gutters. His leg is broken in 2 places. We're at Maple Creek County Hospital. They won't do the surgery without a significant down payment. We have no insurance since you canceled the plan I was on through your old job. Please, honey. I know you're angry, but this is your father. This is life or death. He's in so much pain. Please." I read the email 3 times, the words blurring. A vision of my father, lying in a sterile hospital bed, his leg shattered, flashed in my mind. The old instincts surged, the urge to fix, to pay, to make the pain go away. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy cloak settling on my shoulders. I could pay it. I had already started to replenish my savings. A few $1,000s for the hospital deposit would be easy. My hand was already moving towards the phone when I stopped. I forced myself to take a deep, shuddering breath. I closed my eyes and pictured Dr. Reyes's calm face. "You are resigning from a job you were never meant to have." This wasn't just an accident. It was another crisis, another fire I was expected to put out. It was a trap, baited with guilt and familial duty. Her email wasn't an apology or an olive branch. It was another invoice. I stood up and walked to my desk, my movements stiff. I opened a file on my computer I'd titled, simply, The Ledger. It was a spreadsheet I had started creating with Dr. Reyes's encouragement. It wasn't about keeping score, it was about acknowledging reality. In it, I had logged every major loan, every bailed-out bill, every forgotten birthday where they'd still managed to charge a lavish dinner to my card. And at the top, the entry for $42,500, a stark reminder of the ultimate betrayal. Looking at that list, the fog of guilt began to recede. Their current crisis was a direct consequence of a lifetime of poor choices. My intervention wouldn't fix the root problem, it would only fertilize it. It would teach them that even after the ultimate betrayal, their emergency siren could still summon me. So I did something else. I wrote a check. But it wasn't to Maple Creek County Hospital. I made it out to Cora Sterling for the full amount of the surgical deposit my mother had likely been quoted. I drove to my bank and deposited it into a new account I'd opened, one I'd named the Sanctuary Fund. It was a deposit into my own peace. When I got home, I sent a single, brief text to my cousin Julia. I heard about Uncle Robert. I hope he has a swift recovery. Then I added, knowing the message would be passed along, tell them I am sending my best wishes, but I cannot be their bank anymore. I will not bleed to fix wounds they inflict upon themselves. Julia replied almost instantly. I understand. I'll pass it along. Take care of yourself, Cora. And that was it. The silence that followed didn't ache with guilt. It felt clean. It felt like oxygen. That night, I slept with my window cracked open, listening to the rain and the distant foghorns from the port. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis call. I was resting in the quiet house of my own making. Letting go of people who saw you only as a resource isn't cruelty. It's the highest form of self-respect. It's choosing to live. A year passed. A year of quiet, steady growth. My business flourished. I hired 2 new designers. I took on projects that challenged and inspired me. I started painting again, a hobby I'd abandoned in college because I'd been too busy working part-time jobs to help with bills back home. I built a small, strong circle of friends who knew me as Cora, not as a provider. They were my chosen family, the kind of soul ties that didn't come with a ledger of debts and obligations. The final test came in the form of a wedding invitation, thick and creamy, with silver calligraphy. My cousin Julia was getting married. I knew my parents and Nathan would be there. For a week, I debated not going, a part of me recoiling from the idea of being in the same room with them, of feeling their eyes on me, of enduring the suffocating weight of their unspoken judgment. But then I thought of Julia, of her quiet, unwavering support. This was her day, and my absence would be a statement, a shadow cast over her celebration. I decided I would go, not for them, but for her. And for me. To prove to myself that I could stand in the same space as my past without letting it consume my present. I chose my dress with intention. It was a simple, elegant sheath of black satin. Not black for mourning, but for quiet strength. For finality. It was the color of a moonless night sky, full of stars you can only see when the artificial lights are turned off. I walked into the beautifully restored old ballroom, and I felt their presence immediately. It wasn't a warmth, but a sudden drop in temperature, a subtle shift in the room's energy. I saw them across the hall, near the bar. My father, leaning heavily on a cane, his limp more pronounced than I imagined it would be. He wore a rented tuxedo that was a size too tight in the shoulders. My mother was in a shimmering, rose gold dress, her hair perfectly coiffed. She was holding court with a group of relatives, a sad, brave smile on her face. Nathan stood beside them, looking sullen and out of place. Their eyes found me at the same moment. 3 pairs of eyes, all carrying the same silent, loaded message. Look what you've done. See the wreckage. You broke this. Fix it. I held their gaze for a heartbeat, my expression neutral. I gave a small, polite nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not invitation. Then I turned and walked toward Julia, who rushed to greet me with a hug that felt like coming home. You came, she whispered, squeezing my hand. Thank you. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, I said, and I meant it. I spent the cocktail hour surrounded by Julia's friends, laughing at their stories, talking about work and travel and art. I could feel my family watching me, their collective gaze of physical weight. But I didn't flinch. I let my joy be my shield. I danced with Julia's husband. I toasted the happy couple with champagne, and I reveled in the simple, beautiful act of being present. During dinner, my mother walked past my table. She paused, her hand hovering for a moment before resting lightly on the back of my chair. Her touch sent a jolt through me, a muscle memory of 1,000 other touches that had come with a price. "Cora," she said, her voice soft. "You look different." I slowly turned to meet her gaze. Her eyes were still the same shade of blue, but the manufactured fragility I knew so well seemed to have been replaced by a genuine weariness. I saw the lines of stress around her mouth that hadn't been there before. "I am different, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Her mouth opened, the prelude to a plea, an excuse, a guilt-laden monologue I had heard in 100 different variations. But before she could speak, I held up a hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "I'm here for Julia tonight," I said gently. "This is her day. Let's not." The words hung in the air between us. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not just hurt, but a dawning, painful understanding. It was the look of someone realizing, for the first time, that the door they had slammed shut on their way out had been locked from the other side. She saw what she had lost. Not a bank account, but a daughter. I was no longer the rescue boat she could summon at will. I was the lighthouse, shining from a shore she could no longer reach. She gave a tiny, jerky nod, her hand falling away from my chair. She turned and walked back to her table without another word. Later, during the toasts, my father raised his glass. He spoke of family, of sticking together through thick and thin. As he finished, his eyes sought mine across the room, a clear, desperate appeal for some gesture of reconciliation, a sign that the old ways could be restored. I met his gaze, but I did not raise my glass. I did not smile. I did not blink. Peace doesn't come from pretending the fire never happened. It comes from walking out of the ashes and refusing to carry someone else's smoke. I left after the cake was cut, slipping out into the cool night air without a round of goodbyes. As I drove home along the coastline, the windows down, the salty air filling my car, I felt a sense of profound peace. I had faced the ghosts of my past, and they no longer had any power over me. When I got home, I took one last thing off my mental autopay, the burden of my childhood. It has been 2 years now since the missing $42,500, since the phone call that dismantled my world so it could be rebuilt on solid ground. The guilt no longer ambushes me in the quiet moments. It is a faint, distant echo, a sound easily drowned out by the truth. And the truth is, I gave them more than they ever deserved. I gave them access to the very core of me, and they treated my heart like a resource to be exploited. My 30th birthday, the one they so carelessly disregarded, passed quietly. But my 31st was different. There were no calls from Maple Creek. No cards signed with hollow words, no texts laced with unspoken expectations. There was, however, a knock on my door. It was Julia. She was holding a small, homemade carrot cake, my favorite, with a single, brightly burning candle in the center. She smiled, her eyes full of a deep, knowing warmth. "I just wanted to say," she said softly, "you were never the problem, Cora. You were just the first one brave enough to escape." We stood in my sun-drenched kitchen, and we didn't make a wish as I blew out the candle. We just breathed. We breathed in the scent of cinnamon and sugar, and the clean, salt-tinged air of my new life. Healing isn't always a dramatic, thunderous event. Sometimes, it's a quiet decision, made over and over again, to not reopen the door, even when loneliness knocks, dressed in the familiar clothes of old love. I stopped chasing the idea of a family defined by blood and started nurturing the one defined by soul. The kind that doesn't ask for pieces of you as payment. The kind that doesn't drain you to feel full. The kind that calls not because they need something, but simply because they see you. My mother still posts her cryptic lamentations on social media. My father, I'm told, still plays the role of the wounded patriarch in family circles. But their voices are muted now, their narratives powerless. The walls I built are not made of stone and anger, but of self-respect and peace. I don't care what they say about the daughter they lost, because I am no longer theirs to define.